You know, I've heard some negative things and I've heard some positive things. You know, I think it comes with just comes with the sport. You know, some people are going to support me and some people are going to be against me. You know, some people say that they think I'm still a champ, and some people, you know, call me a quitter. You know, I got a little bit of everything.
Today we're going to be talking about what happened to former WEC Bantamweight champion and former UFC Bantamweight competitor Brian Bowles. Hailing from Charleston, West Virginia, Bowles got his start in MMA the same way as a lot of fighters, and that was through competing in wrestling during high school. A former teammate of his introduced him to MMA after graduating high school, and he began training at the Hardcore Gym in Athens, Georgia, now renamed SBG Athens. Bowles would compile an amateur record of 7-0 before going pro in 2006 and starting out 3-0 with 2 first-round stoppages, becoming known for his punching power and chokes. He was then called up to the premier organization for lighter weight classes at the time, the WEC, where he continued his winning ways. Bowles rattled off 4 wins, all by finish against Charlie Valencia, Marcos Galval, Damasio Page, and Will Ribeiro, earning himself a title shot against the pretty much invincible WEC Bantamweight champion at the time, Miguel Torres, standing at a monstrous 36-1 and riding a 15-fight win streak. The fight between Bowles and Torres was originally scheduled to headline WEC 40 on April 5, 2009, but Bowles was forced to withdraw due to a back injury a few weeks before the event, being replaced by Takeya Mizugaki. Torres went on to defeat Mizugaki by decision, boosting his record to 37-1 and extending his win streak to 16. Bowles' title shot was now set to take place at WEC 42 on August 9, 2009. The fight was highly anticipated, with Bowles being undefeated at 7-0 and Miguel staking claim to one of the most impressive MMA records at the time. Bowles opened as a big plus 300 underdog, with he himself calling the fight David vs. Goliath. The consensus was that Miguel was just too dominant and more skilled than Bowles in every area that the fight could take place, but people still wanted to see how he would employ his blitzkrieg style against someone who hit as hard as Brian Bowles. The day of the fight came, and in the first round, Bowles showed off his power early, landing a big right hand that rocked Torres a minute into the fight. Bowles then pressed forward, and Miguel countered with 2 left hands as he was pushed back into the cage. Miguel then seemed to jump guard, and while in guard, Brian landed a bit of ground and pound. The two returned to their feet with just under 2 minutes left, where Miguel landed a crisp right hand and barraged forward with a flurry of punches as Bowles shelled up and unleashed a right hand from hell that put Miguel down. Bowles followed up with some punches that put Miguel out cold at the 1 minute and 3 second mark of the very first round. Brian Bowles had shocked the MMA world, becoming the undefeated, undisputed WEC Bantamweight champion, improving to 8-0, and ending Miguel Torres' 16-fight win streak and his undefeated run in the WEC, knocking him to 37-2. This was also Miguel's first career loss by stoppage. Being the one to end Miguel's legendary streak is what most MMA fans remember Brian Bowles for, since his reign at the top of the bantamweight division was short-lived, lasting less than a year. Before Bowles could make one successful defense of the title, he ran into the greatest bantamweight of all time in Dominic Cruz at WEC 47 in March of 2010, losing the belt by doctor stoppage due to a broken hand. Cruz was dominant throughout the fight, showing off his trademark footwork and landing clean combination that Bowles had no answer for. Dominic was 15-1 and undefeated at bantamweight at the time, with his only loss being to Uriah Faber at featherweight. If you have never seen prime WEC Dominic Cruz before the injuries in action, I suggest you go check it out. Cruz had handed Bowles the first loss of his career, and he was now back as a contender in the bantamweight division. Bowles would have to get back on the winning track in the UFC though, since the WEC had merged with the UFC in 2011. He pulled off 2 nice victories in a row, submitting Damasio Page at UFC Live Sanchez vs. Catman in almost identical fashion as the first time he fought him 3 years prior. He also added a UD win over his replacement in the Torres fight, Takeya Mizugaki at UFC 132. Those 2 wins earned him a title eliminator bout against Uriah Faber at UFC 139 in 2011. The fight came and the first round wasn't very eventful, with the two feeling each other out on the feet for most of the round until Faber scored a takedown and secured some control time. At the beginning of the second round, Faber landed a huge uppercut and follow-up knee that crumbled Bowles to the canvas. Bowles struggled to survive as Faber landed a big knee to the body and some vicious elbows, causing Bowles to roll over into the north-south position where Faber locked in a mounting guillotine to get the submission finish. Bowles dropped to 10-2 with the submission loss being his first of his kind. Bowles took an 18-month layoff after the Faber fight and returned to UFC 160 in May of 2013 against George Roop, where he lost by TKO in the second round. In the fight, Bowles was on his back foot, shelling up pretty much for the entire time, while the 6'1" Roop threw a plethora of head kicks at him. It would be a jab though that put Bowles down, and a subsequent follow-up punches secured the TKO finish. This was Brian Bowles' second consecutive loss and ultimately the last fight of his career. Why did Brian decide to shut it down after just one small skid? His record was still impressive at 10-3, with 2 of those losses being to a champion and former champion. Well, before he willfully stepped away, Brian was forced away for 9 months after failing his UFC 160 drug test with an elevated testosterone to epitestosterone ratio of 20-1. That's over 3 times the allowed ratio of 6-1. He was fined $5,700 for this offense. This was before USADA was implemented in 2015, so doping offenses was a little more frowned upon since you had to be on some wild shit in order to get caught with more relaxed testing. There were also loopholes in place like testosterone replacement therapy, or TRT, exemptions that fighters used in order to get around failing drug tests. A fighter getting caught doping always brings their entire career into question. One has to wonder, was Brian on something when he beat Miguel to become Bantamweight champion? If so, that would be a shame having Miguel's crazy run come to the end as a result of cheating. In my personal opinion though, I think Brian was taking things in order to recover from the crazy amount of injuries he suffered throughout his career. He stated on the episode of the MMA Hour before UFC 160 that he had broken his hand on 3 occasions, was diagnosed with a pair of bulging discs, a pair of degenerative discs, and he had knee issues, hence the sleeve he would always wear. Also remember, he pulled out of the first Torres fight due to a back injury, and he pulled out of what was supposed to be his last fight in the WEC against Wagner Fabiano due to a foot injury. I am in no way trying to justify Brian's decision to take PEDs, but trying to give an understandable and less heinous explanation as to why he may have took PEDs instead of being just a straight up cheater trying to gain an advantage over a clean fighter. Only Brian knows why he did what he did, and I'm not here to judge him for that. Brian's suspension would be up in early 2014, yet he stayed out of action that entire year. 2015 is where we began to see the writing on the wall in terms of the end of Brian's MMA career, as he was arrested on January 14th on felony drug and weapon charges stemming from a search warrant issued to his home in Arcade, Georgia. Upon arrival, officers found an array of drugs including Big M, that good gas, other narcotics, and a gun. They also found packaging materials, so I'm guessing Brian was a plug. I mean, what do you expect from somebody living on Stoner Road? I bet he had endless clientele. He was charged with possession of a Schedule 4 drug, possession of a Schedule 4 drug with intent to sell, possession of that green stuff as well as intent to sell, possession of tools for the commission of a crime, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime. All felonies. Brian was released from his UFC contract on March 2nd, 2015, a little less than 2 months after his arrest. It's kind of difficult to pinpoint just how much time Bowles spent behind bars, since any mention of him seems to fade after his arrest. You would think he would be facing some hard time being charged with multiple felonies, but after some research I stumbled across a post on his personal Facebook page from November 19, 2014 that has a comment detailing a bit of Bowles' jail stay. The poster must have seen this post in his memories tab a year later on November 19, 2015 after meeting Bowles in jail, since the comment is from 8 years ago and the post is from 9 years ago. This helps set a timeline, and I will read the post for you. In Jackson County Jail, I finally got to meet the baddest bantamweight banger in the world, Jackson County's own Brian Bowles. After talking to him, I am 100% positive he will be acquitted of all charges. He's a world champion and his name will be cleared. His court date is the 1st of next month, and he will be released and acquitted. But if you think he was a beast before, wait till you see what 5 months of healthy living with 2,000 push-ups, pull-ups, crunches, and 5 hours of walking all day will do to an already octagon-proven warrior, along with the commercial he watches every day of Dominic Cruz taking his belt in his highlight reel of the upcoming Bantamweight championship fight, and nothing to do but sit in a tiny room alone in a segregated dorm, basically in solitary confinement, which I assure you is a mental torment. Having nothing to do but work out and be angry, so watch our MMA world. I predict Brian Bowles becoming Bantamweight champion within 2 years. He has become a patient-focused fighter, but when they open his jail square and open the door to the octagon, a relentless monster will be unleashed, and I fear for any man who stands across from him. Just watch his highlight reel on YouTube, then imagine the destructive force multiplied by unimaginable numbers. I got his autograph. I urge everyone to show your support for our hometown world champion, Brian Bowles. Brian must have been in jail reflecting on his career and probably was itching to get back out there and try it again, but obviously none of that happened since Brian Bowles didn't compete again after he was released from jail. I started to see people share posts of Brian in the gym around late 2015 to early 2016, so I'm assuming he spent the 5 months in jail and he was released on probation or charges were thrown out. I was going to go on about how crazy it is that he didn't spend much time in jail with all of those charges, since my brother just recently served 5 years for much less, but I digress. I couldn't find any official retirement statement from Brian, but it had been years since Brian competed, and when looking at the posts I saw of him in the gym, he looked like he was in more of a trainer/mentor role. That currently seems to be what he's up to now. He himself doesn't post anything, but his coach Rory Singer of SGB Athens posts a lot of gym photos, and Brian is always in them helping out the young and up-and-comers. Brian enjoyed a great run in the sport and will always lay claim to one of the biggest upsets of all time. People may throw stones at his career for his PED violation, his arrest, and how his career ended, which was within their right, I guess. Regardless, Brian was once on top of the toughest division in the toughest organization, even if it was for a brief period. I read this Bleacher Report article basically saying Brian was always mid and that he had only one good win, and that was against Miguel Torres. Man, I definitely don't agree with that, and it highlights how fickle MMA fans and reporters can be. A fighter makes a mistake, loses a couple of fights, or has conflicting world viewpoints, and all of a sudden they are the 2008 0-16 Detroit Lions. I'm not saying Brian is all time, because the sport has evolved so much so fast, but to say he had one quality win is asinine. He finished Charlie Valencia, who fought everyone at bantamweight. He finished Marcos Galvao, who became a champion in Bellator. He finished Demashio Page twice, who was 15-4 by the time he joined the UFC, and he finished Will Ribeiro, who was 10-1 at the time, with Bryan being his last fight before suffering a horrific event that left him paralyzed. That WEC run was a nice one, and he deserves credit for that. In conclusion, Bryan is living the quiet life now, just hanging out with friends and being your normal everyday person. He has stuck around MMA, but he doesn't do anything public pertaining to it. He has a close relationship with Jeff Bedard, who was one of his coaches as well as a former opponent of Miguel Torres. It must have been really cool to avenge his coach's defeat and win the title. Wishing Bryan the best, and we are out here, you guys. Thank you all for watching. Peace.